They told you to be patient. They told you to wait your turn. They told you to fit in, to follow the crowd, to seek approval. But here's the truth. If you keep living like that, 2026 will look exactly like every year before it. This is the year you put yourself first. Not in a selfish, careless way, but in a powerful, disciplined, intentional way. Because most people are lost. They are chasing noise. They are addicted to validation. They are measuring their worth based on other people's opinions. And while they're busy doing that, they forget the one person they're responsible for themselves. According to Robert Greene, real power begins when you stop seeking approval and start mastering yourself. So ask yourself, when was the last time you chose your path? Your one your friends expected, not the one your family pushed, but the one that felt true to you. Because deep down you already know you should be doing. You know what you're avoiding. You know where you're wasting your time. And that's the painful part. Your biggest enemy isn't the world, it's your own lower nature. The part of you that wants comfort, distraction, and easy pleasure. But the version of you that wins, that version is different. That version wakes up early when it's hard. That version stays focused when everything is trying to distract them. That version doesn't need applause. Because they are building something deeper, self-respect. Listen carefully. If you don't respect your own time, your own energy, your own goals, no one else will. Putting yourself first means saying no. No to distractions. No to toxic people. No to habits that slowly destroy your future. It means embracing solitude. Because in silence, you discover who you really are. And most people are afraid of that. They stay busy, not because they're productive, but because they're running from themselves. But you, if you want to be different, you have to sit with that discomfort. You have to face your weaknesses, your fears, your excuses. Because mastery doesn't come from motivation. It comes from discipline, repeated over and over again. Understand this. You cannot become powerful if your attention is scattered. You cannot build something meaningful if you are chasing everything at once. Focus is your weapon. While everyone else is distracted, while everyone else is scrolling, while everyone else is talking, you are building quietly, relentlessly, obsessively. And one day they'll look at you and say, you got lucky. But you'll know the truth. You chose yourself. You protected your energy. You invested in your growth when no one was watching. That's what putting yourself first looks like. It's not glamorous. It's not easy. It's not popular, but it's powerful. So in 2026, stop waiting. Stop explaining. Stop explaining. Stop asking permission. Block out the noise. Trust your path. And commit to becoming the person you were meant to be. Because at the end of the day, no one is coming to save you. And that's not a weakness. That's your greatest power. Most people never truly choose their path. They inherit it. Comes from parents, society, trends, or fear. And over time, they become disconnected from what they actually want. According to Robert Greene's ideas on mastery, every human being has something deeper inside. A natural inclination, almost like a quiet voice guiding them toward what they are meant to do, super summary 1. But the problem is that voice is often buried under expectations, distractions, and the need to fit in. When you were younger, this voice was clearer. You were naturally drawn to certain activities, certain interests, certain curiosities. You didn't question it, you just followed what fascinated you. That's it. That early attraction wasn't random. It was a clue. Greene explains that these early inclinations are often signals pointing toward your life's task. The work that aligns with who you truly are, Grandman 2. But as you grow older, pressure begins to reshape your decision. You start choosing based on money, approval, or status instead of alignment. That's where most people go wrong. They choose paths that look good on the outside but feel empty on the inside. They chase opportunities that impress others but slowly disconnect from themselves. And over time, this creates frustration, lack of motivation, and a sense of being lost. Because when your path is not aligned with your nature, everything feels harder than it should. Putting yourself first means breaking that pattern. It means having the courage to question the direction you're on. Not blindly accepting what's been handed to you, but asking yourself, does this actually fit me? Does this energize me? Or am I just following what's expected? Greene emphasizes that finding your path is not about instant clarity. It's a process. You reconnect with your natural interests, then explore them, then gradually shape them into something real. Cypreads.com 3. It's not a straight line. There will be confusion, trial and error, and moments where you doubt everything. But that's part of it. The journey itself refines your direction. Another important part is avoiding what he calls the false path. This is when you choose something for the wrong reasons. Money, fame, attention, or pressure from others. Louis Schulman 4. These paths can look attractive at first, but they rarely lead to fulfillment because deep down, you know it's not yours. And that internal conflict will always hold you back. Choosing your real path requires honesty, brutal honesty. You have to admit what excites you and what doesn't. You have to accept that your interests might not match what others expect from you. And you have to be willing to walk away from things that don't align, even if they seem safe. This is where most people hesitate, because choosing your own path means taking responsibility. It means you can't blame anyone else if things don't work out. It means stepping into uncertainty without guarantees, but it also means something powerful. You take control of your life. When you start aligning with your true direction, something changes. Your energy increases, your focus sharpens, your willingness to work becomes natural, not forced. That's because you're no longer pushing yourself against your nature. You're working with it. And that's the difference between average effort and mastery. People who find their path don't rely on constant motivation. They are driven by genuine interest. They can spend hours practicing, learn, improving, not because they have to, but because they want to. Green points out that this deep connection to your field is what fuels persistence, patience, and long-term success. Graham Man too. But none of this happens unless you make a decision. A decision to stop drifting, a decision to stop copying others, a decision to actually listen to yourself. Because the truth is, your path is already there. It's just been ignored. Most people never truly choose their path. They inherit it. It comes from parents, society, trends, or fear. And over time, they become disconnected from what they actually want. According to Robert Greene's ideas on mastery, every human being has something deeper inside, a natural inclination, almost like a quiet voice guiding them toward what they are meant to do. But the problem is, that voice is often buried under expectations, distractions, and the need to fit in. When you were younger, this voice was clearer. You were naturally drawn to certain activities, certain interests, certain curiosities. You didn't question it, you just followed what fascinated you. That early attraction wasn't random. It was a clue. Greene explains that these early inclinations are often signals pointing toward your life's task, the work that aligns with who you truly are. But as you grow older, pressure begins to reshape your decisions. You start choosing based on money, approval, or status instead of alignment. That's where most people go wrong. They choose paths that look good on the outside but feel empty on the inside. They chase opportunities that impress others but slowly disconnect from themselves. And over time, this creates frustration, lack of motivation, and a sense of being lost. Because when your path is not aligned with your nature, everything feels harder than it should. Putting yourself first means breaking that pattern. It means having the courage to question the direction you're on. Not blindly accepting what's been handed to you, but asking yourself, does this actually fit me? Does this energize me? Or am I just following what's expected? Greene emphasizes that finding your path is not about instant clarity. It's a process. You reconnect with your natural interests, then explore them, then gradually shape them into something real. It's not a straight line. There will be confusion, trial and error, and moments where you doubt everything. But that's part of it. The journey itself refines your direction. Another important part is avoiding what he calls the false path. This is when you choose something for the wrong reasons. Money, fame, attention, or pressure from others. These paths can look attractive at first, but they rarely lead to fulfillment. Because deep down, you know it's not yours. And that internal conflict will always hold you back. Choosing your real path requires honesty. You have to admit what excites you and what doesn't. You have to accept that your interests might not match what others expect from you. And you have to be willing to walk away from things that don't align, even if they seem safe. This is where most people hesitate, because choosing your own path means taking responsibility. It means you can't blame anyone else if things don't work out. It means stepping into uncertainty without guarantees. But it also means something powerful. You take control of your life. When you start aligning with your true direction, something changes. Your energy, your focus sharpens. Your willingness to work becomes natural, not forced. That's because you're no longer pushing yourself against your nature. You're working with it. And that's the difference between average effort and mastery. People who find their path don't rely on constant motivation. They are driven by genuine interest. They can spend hours practicing, learning, improving, not because they have to, but because they want to. Green points out that this deep connection to your field is what fuels persistence, patience, and long T. Most people chase attention because it feels like progress. They want recognition, quick wins, visible results. They want to look successful before they actually become skilled. But that mindset quietly destroys real growth because attention is temporary while learning is permanent. And if you build your life around being seen instead of improving, you end up with shallow abilities and fragile confidence. Robert Greene makes it clear that the early stage of any journey, what he calls the apprenticeship, is not about impressing people, gaining status, or chasing rewards. It's about learning, pure learning, choosing environments, situations, and experiences based on how much they teach you, not how much they pay or how good they look on the surface. That alone separates those who eventually master something from those who stay average. When you prioritize attention, your focus shifts outward. You start thinking, how do I look? What do people think of me? Am I ahead of others? Yet mindset creates pressure and insecurity. You begin performing instead of improving. You avoid mistakes because they might make you look bad. You choose easy tasks that give quick results instead of difficult ones that actually develop skill. But learning requires the opposite mindset. It requires you to be comfortable looking like a beginner. It requires patience. It requires doing work that no one applauds. In fact, Green emphasizes that trying to stand out too early, to impress, to prove yourself is a mistake. It distracts you from observing, absorbing, and understanding the deeper mechanics of what you are learning. Real growth happens when your ego steps aside. When you stop asking, how can I be noticed? And start asking, what can I learn from this? Everything changes. Your attention turns inward. You begin to see details others miss. You become more curious, more focused, more resilient. You stop rushing the process, and that's important because mastery is slow. There's no shortcut, no hack, no fast track. The people who become exceptional are not the ones who chase outcome. They are the ones who fall in love with the process. Green highlights that true mastery is driven by a deep connection to the field itself, not external rewards. That connection fuels persistence, allowing individuals to push through boredom, frustration, and setbacks. Think about it. If your only motivation is attention, what happens when it disappears? You quit. You lose interest. You move on to something else. That's why so many people start strong but never finish. Their motivation is external, and external motivation is unstable. But when your focus is learning, you become self-driven. You don't need validation to continue. You don't need applause to stay consistent. The work itself becomes enough. You find satisfaction in understanding something deeper and getting slightly better each day. That's a different kind of reward, one that builds over time. There's also another danger in chasing attention. It creates impatience. You start expecting results too quickly. You measure progress in days or weeks instead of years. And when reality doesn't match your expectations, you feel frustrated or you think something is wrong. But nothing is wrong. You're just approaching it the wrong way. Learning takes time. Skill takes repetition. Mastery takes years of focused effort. Green stresses that patience and persistence matter far more than natural talent. The people who succeed are not necessarily the most gifted. They are the ones who stay committed to learning longer than everyone else. So instead of asking how fast you can succeed, ask how deeply you can learn. Instead of chasing recognition, chase understanding. Instead of trying to be impressive, try to be better. Because in the end, attention fades, trends change, people forget, but skill stays. What you learn becomes part of you. It shapes how you think, how you act, how you solve problems. It gives you confidence that doesn't depend on anyone else. And over time, ironically, it brings the very thing most people misunderstand discipline. They think it's about forcing yourself, pushing harder, or relying on motivation to get things done. But motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. One day you feel strong, the next day you feel nothing. If your progress depends on how you feel, you will never be consistent. And without consistency, there is no growth. Robert Greene makes it clear that mastery is not built on talent or sudden bursts of effort. It is built on sustained, repeated practice over time. It is the result of showing up every single day, whether you feel like it or not, and doing the work with focus and intention. Consistency is what separates those who dream from those who actually become something. Think about it. Anyone can work hard for a day. Anyone can push themselves for a week. But very few people can stay committed for months, for years, without immediate rewards. That's where discipline comes in. Discipline is not about intensity, it's about reliability. It's about becoming the kind of person who does what needs to be done, regardless of mood, regardless of circumstances. In the beginning, it feels uncomfortable. You have to fight distractions. You have to resist the urge to quit. You have to push through boredom, frustration, and doubt. And this is where most people stop. They expect progress to feel exciting, but real progress often feels repetitive and slow. Greene emphasizes that during the learning process, people often give in to boredom or impatience. And that's exactly what prevents them from improving. But if you keep going, if you stay consistent, something changes. What once felt difficult starts to feel natural. What once required effort starts to become automatic. Your mind and body adapt to the repetition. You begin to understand things at a deeper level. Patterns become clearer. Skills become sharper. This is how mastery is built, not through sudden breakthroughs, but through small improvements repeated over time. There's also a hidden power in consistency that most people overlook. It builds trust with yourself. Every time you say you're going to do something and actually do it, you strengthen your self-respect. You prove to yourself that you can rely on your own word. But every time you quit, delay, or make excuses, you weaken that trust. Over time, this shapes your identity. You either become someone who follows through or someone who doesn't. And that identity affects everything. Greene points out that people develop the equality of mind they deserve through their actions. In other words, your habits shape your thinking, your confidence, and your capabilities. Discipline is not just about productivity, it's about transforming who you are. Another important part of discipline is patience. We live in a world that encourages speed. Quick results, instant success, fast recognition. But mastery doesn't work like that. It requires long-term commitment. It requires you to keep going even when you don't see immediate progress. This is where consistency becomes powerful. Because when you stop focusing on results and start focusing on the process, you remove frustration. You stop asking, why am I not there yet? And start asking, did I show up today? That shift changes everything. You begin to measure success differently. Success is no longer about outcomes. It's about effort. It's about whether you stayed committed, whether you improved even slightly, whether you kept going when it was easier to stop. And over time, those small efforts compound. Days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, months turn into years. And suddenly you are no longer average. But here's the truth most people don't want to hear. This path is not exciting. It's repetitive, it's quiet, it's often unnoticed. There's no applause for consistency. No one is watching you practice. No one is rewarding your discipline in the early stages. That's why most people give up. They want recognition before they've earned it. But those who stay, those who keep showing up, they gain something far more valuable. They gain control. Control over their habits, control over their focus, control over their future. Because once you master consistency, everything else becomes possible. You don't rely on motivation anymore. You don't wait for the perfect moment. You don't make excuses. You just execute. And that's what makes discipline so powerful. It removes negotiation. It removes hesitation. It turns action into a habit instead of a decision. At that point, success is no longer a question of if. It becomes a matter of a when. Most people live under silent pressure they don't even question. They shape their decisions based on what others will think. They adjust their behavior to avoid criticism. They measure their worth through approval, likes, praise, and acceptance. And over time, they lose something essential, their independence. Robert Greene points out that one of the biggest obstacles to mastery is this need for validation. When you depend on attention, approval, or recognition, you become vulnerable. Your direction is no longer controlled by your own standards, but by the reactions of others. And those reactions are unstable, inconsistent, and often misleading. Think about how this plays out in real life. You hesitate to take risks because you might fail in front of others. You avoid speaking honestly because you don't want to be judged. You choose safer paths because they are more socially accepted. At first, it feels like you are protecting yourself, but in reality, you are limiting yourself because growth requires discomfort. And if your decisions are based on avoiding discomfort in front of others, you will never push far enough to evolve. Greene emphasizes that many people fall into what he calls the false path, choosing career goals and lifestyles for external reasons like money, fame, or approval. These choices may look successful from the outside, but internally they create conflict and dissatisfaction. Why? Because they are not truly yours. When you rely on approval, you start living a performance instead of a life. You become more focused on how things appear rather than how they actually are. You prioritize image over substance, and that leads to a fragile sense of self, one that depends entirely on how others respond to you. The problem is, approval is unpredictable. One day people support you. The next day they criticize you. The same people who praise you can turn against you. If your confidence is built on that, it will constantly rise and fall. Detaching from approval means shifting your center of gravity inward. Instead of asking, but do they like this? You ask, is this right for me? Instead of asking, how do I look? You ask, am I improving? That shift is subtle but powerful, because now your progress is no longer controlled by external noise. It is controlled by your own standards, your own discipline, your own awareness. Greene also highlights the importance of developing the ability to judge your own work. If you remain dependent on others for validation, you never fully mature in your craft. You stay psychologically dependent, always needing feedback, reassurance, or approval before you can move forward. But when you detach, something changes. You begin to see your work more clearly. You become more honest about your weaknesses. You stop protecting your ego and start improving your skill. This is where real growth begins. Because seeking approval is often tied to protecting your ego. You want to look good. You want to avoid mistakes. You want to be seen as competent. But that mindset limits your willingness to experiment, to fail, to learn. Detachment breaks that pattern. It allows you to take risks without fear of judgment. It allows you to fail without feeling destroyed. It allows you to focus on progress instead of perception. And that's critical, because mastery is built on long-term effort, not short-term validation. Another hidden danger of approval seeking is conformity. And you constantly look at others for validation. You start copying them. You follow trends. You imitate what is popular. You avoid standing out. Over time, you lose originality. You become replaceable. But those who achieve something meaningful do the opposite. They trust their instincts. They follow their own direction. They are willing to be misunderstood. Greene explains that true mastery requires staying connected to your inner voice, even when it goes against what others expect or accept. That's not easy. It means facing criticism. It means being alone at times. It means walking a path that others might not understand. But that's the price of independence. And independence is power, because once you stop needing approval, you become dangerous in a different way. You are no longer controlled by praise or criticism. You are not easily manipulated. You are not distracted by trends. You are focused, grounded, and self-directed. You don't chase attention anymore. You don't adjust yourself to fit expectation. You don't wait for permission. You move based on your own standards. And ironically, this is when respect starts to come. Not because you asked for it, not because you chased it, but because people recognize something rare. Someone who is not trying to impress, but trying to improve. Detaching from approval is not about ignoring people completely. It's about not depending on them. You can still listen, still learn, still observe, but your direction comes from within. That's what putting yourself first really means. It means your values come first. Your growth comes first, your standards come first, and everything else becomes secondary. Because at the end of the day, if you don't define yourself, the world will do it for you and it will rarely get it right. Failure is not the end of your progress. It is the raw material. Most people treat failure like something to avoid, hide, or feel ashamed of. But in reality, every mistake you make is giving you information that success alone can never provide. It shows you what doesn't work, where your weaknesses are, and what needs to be improved. Without failure, you stay blind to your own limits. Robert Greene strongly emphasizes that mastery is built through a deliberate apprenticeship. And a core part of that process is learning directly from mistakes instead of fearing them. The early stages of any skill are always filled with errors, confusion, and repeated setbacks. But those moments are not signs that you are failing. They are signs that you are learning. Turn shark home. The problem is that most people interpret failure emotionally instead of logically. They see it as a reflection of their identity. I failed, so I'm not good enough. That thinking creates fear, and fear leads to avoidance. Once you start avoiding failure, you also avoid growth. Because growth only happens when you are willing to step into situations where success is not guaranteed. Greene reframes failure completely. He presents it as a form of education, one that is more honest than praise or success. When something works, you don't always understand why it worked. But when something fails, the reasons become clearer. You see the flaws in your thinking, your strategy, or your execution. Each failure exposes a gap that needs to be filled. And that gap becomes your next focus for improvement. Turns to a search for it. But to use failure properly, you need a shift in mindset. Instead of reacting emotionally, you observe. Instead of quitting, you analyze. Instead of protecting your ego, you study the mistake. This is what transforms failure from a setback into a tool. Every wrong attempt becomes feedback. Every disappointment becomes direction. Most people never reach mastery because they avoid this process. They want progress without pain, learning without mistakes, and success without experimentation. But mastery doesn't work that way. It is built through trial and error, through repeated exposure to difficulty until patterns start to emerge and skill becomes intuitive. When you embrace failure, something important happens inside you. Fear begins to lose control. First, failure feels heavy because your identity is attached to outcomes. But over time, when you repeatedly face mistakes and survive them, you realize something powerful. You are not destroyed by failure. You are shaped by it. This realization builds resilience. You stop seeing failure as a stop sign and start seeing it as part of the process. Instead of asking, "Oh, what if I fail?" you begin asking, "What can I learn if I fail?" That shift removes hesitation. It allows you to take action more freely, experiment more boldly, and push your abilities further. Greene also highlights that failure is essential for developing true skill because it reveals reality. Ideas in your mind often don't match real-world execution. Only when you act do you discover the difference between what you think will work and what actually works. Failure bridges that gap. It forces you to adjust, refine, and improve until your skill aligns with reality. Over time, repeated failure creates a deeper kind of confidence, not based on perfection, but on experience. You begin to trust that even if things go wrong, you can adapt and recover. That trust is far stronger than surface-level confidence built on success alone. And slowly, something changes in your behavior. You stop fearing mistakes. You stop avoiding challenges. You stop protecting your ego. Instead, you start seeking feedback, even if it comes through failure, because you understand its value. This is the mindset of mastery, treating every failure as a step forward rather than a step back. In the end, failure is not what stops progress. Fear of failure does, and once you remove that fear, you gain access to the fastest form of learning available, experience shaped by reality itself. Focus is not something you are born with. It is something you build, protect, and strengthen over time through deliberate practice. In a world where everything is designed to pull your attention away, the ability to concentrate deeply on one thing has become rare, almost like a superpower. Most people think they are working hard, but in reality, their attention is scattered across messages, notifications, thoughts, and distractions. And scattered attention always produces scattered results. Robert Greene emphasizes that mastery requires deep immersion in a field of study where the mind is trained to go beyond surface level engagement and enter a state of complete absorption. In that state, you are no longer thinking about distractions or external validation. You are fully inside the work, learning its patterns, its structure, and its hidden logic. Turn to Research 3. At the beginning, focus feels uncomfortable. Your mind resists it. It tries to escape boredom, look for stimulation, or switch tasks. This is because the brain has been trained for quick rewards. But real progress does not come from quick rewards. It comes from sustained attention. When you stay with one task long enough, something important begins to happen. Your mind starts to settle and your thinking becomes clearer. Most people never reach this stage because they give up too early. They confuse discomfort with inability. They assume that if focus feels difficult, it must not be right for them. But in reality, difficulty is part of the training process. Every time you resist distraction, you're strengthening mental control. Every time you return your attention to the task, you're building discipline. Greene highlights that deep work is what separates average performance from high-level mastery. When you are fully focused, you begin to see details that are invisible to a distracted mind. You understand problems more deeply, you solve them more creatively, and you retain knowledge more effectively. In contrast, shallow attention produces shallow understanding. You may do many things, but you master nothing. To develop true focus, you must first learn to control your environment. That means reducing unnecessary noise, limiting distractions, and creating conditions where concentration becomes easier. But environment alone is not enough. The real challenge is internal, the constant urge to switch attention. You have to train yourself to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. Another important aspect of focus is patience. Deep work cannot be rushed. You cannot jump from distraction to mastery in a few days. It is built slowly through repetition. The longer you stay engaged with a single task, the more your mind adapts to it. Over time, what once felt difficult begins to feel natural. Greene also connects focus with the idea of intense practice. Mastery is not achieved by working casually for long hours. It is achieved by working with complete concentration for shorter, more meaningful periods. A focused hour is more powerful than an unfocused day. Because in that hour, your mind is fully engaged, processing information at a deeper level. There's also a psychological transformation that happens through focus. As your attention becomes stronger, your confidence increases. You begin to trust your ability to handle complexity. Tasks that once felt overwhelming start to feel manageable. You no longer panic when faced with difficult work. You approach it with calm intensity. But perhaps the most important part of focus is what it protects you from: distraction-driven living. Without focus, your mind is constantly reacting, jumping from one stimulus to another, never settling, never building depth. With focus, you take control. You decide what deserves your attention instead of letting the world decide for you. Over time, this creates a powerful shift in identity. You stop being someone who reacts to everything and become someone who directs everything. Your attention becomes intentional rather than accidental. And that intentionality is what leads to real achievement. In the end, focus is not just a skill, it is a way of living. It determines the quality of your thoughts, the depth of your understanding, and the level of your results. And in a distracted world, the ability to focus deeply is what separates those who drift from those who build something meaningful. In the end, everything comes down to one simple truth. Your life will always reflect where your attention is directed. If your focus is scattered, your results will be scattered. If your focus is deep and controlled, your progress becomes unstoppable. The world is full of distractions competing for your mind every second. But greatness belongs only to those who can silence the noise and stay locked into what truly matters. When you learn to protect your attention, you start to take control of your future. Every hour of deep focus builds something real, something lasting, something that cannot be replaced by shortcuts or temporary motivation.